The next thing that I want to talk about some is evidence-based practices and why they're important for schools to be using with like students with disabilities. There's constantly new research being put out about different types of disabilities and different classifications of IEP students and how best to serve those students. And it's important that schools are keeping on top of those and being aware of what can work. And this is something that parents can also do. A lot of libraries will have access to like databases with new research online. And even if like at home you might not have access to internet, you can go to a library and have access to internet. And things like that. And the schools has to be providing information on things like that. They have to be working well with you and your students to be able to best serve your students. For example, if evidence is showing that students with autism need to be redirected X amount of times, they need to be doing that. If research is showing that something is overstimulating or doesn't work for students that have a certain disability, then the school shouldn't be doing that. And even things like teaching math with manipulatives, like things that you can touch and move around, teaching English or by watching videos with subtitles or any other foreign languages and things like that. Like if English isn't your home language, things like that are necessary to be like used and done by students. And those need to be like embedded in their IEP or like being used by their teacher. And that's something that you can email even if your student doesn't have an IEP and they only have a 504 plan, or maybe they're recently transitioning out of having a 504 plan or something. You can still send their teachers an email and make sure that they're using the practices that your student needs. Within evidence-based practices and things, I'm going to move into talking some about example goals and objectives for students that have an IEP when you're at that meeting talking to like their teachers. And this kind of goes into that advocacy piece because it is important as parents that we're advocating for our children and making sure that their needs are met. So when we're making goals, a lot of times academic goals are going to be made because it's a school and an IEP is an individualized education plan. So it's natural that that's going to be something that's happening, especially if something that the student struggles with is academics. And the thing about goals is, like I said above, or before, not above, it needs to be specific and measurable, like in a certain period of time. It can't just be like, oh, over the course of high school, the student will be able to do this. No, that's not a good goal. It doesn't work. And it's not able to be assessed. It needs to have checkpoints and be able to be checked. So a good goal would maybe be by April, if we're having this meeting in September, the student will be able to read at a fourth grade reading level as measured by whatever assessment that the school uses. It could be like NWEA or something like that, but that's specific, that's measurable, and we're able to like have a baseline for what it should be measured by so we know where we're coming from and where we're going. Another thing is maybe if your student struggles with skills or observations or something, they could be able to identify a difference or however many differences or a change as measured by this assessment or something like that, or this certain teacher after reading this certain book they're able to identify certain things, but there needs to be like a specific thing that is not variable, that isn't going to change with time when we're making these things for our students. And the goal doesn't have to be only short term, 6 months, 1 year. It can be across like 2 years or something, but the goal is for these goals and objectives to be able to be checked in on, and the student is making progress towards the goal, and that's something that's able to be seen. Another thing when making goals is there can be like emotional and behavioral goals as well. So maybe the student gets really excited about things, they have really big emotions that aren't totally socially appropriate in school and aren't like conducive to a learning environment. We might want to say a student will be able to regulate their excitement effectively and still learn in this class when this thing is happening. Like maybe they really like watching videos, and so when there's a video, they don't pay attention or they talk. That's something that needs to be indicated in the IEP and can be checked up on. And behaviorally, maybe the student exhibits a certain antisocial behavior that can't be done at school. We want the student to maybe do this once a day instead of all the time every day. The goal doesn't have to be for the student to stop doing something. It can also be a decrease and like a gradual change. But again, it needs to be in a like specific amount of time or like time period for the student. So maybe in the next year, the student will stop doing it, but in 6 months, they'll be doing it like once per day or something like that. So yeah, those are my tips for that for parents.